Okay, so now that we have our drive prepared, let's go ahead and actually launch Final Cut Pro. Now, again, Final Cut Pro lives in your Applications folder, and you can always go down there and find it. But the fastest way to access this on any computer, I think, is to use the Spotlight tool, the magnifying glass up here at the top, and type Final. And usually, Final Cut Pro will be one of your top hits. And you always want to launch and make sure it's the one that's listed under Applications. So I'm going to click that, and that will actually launch Final Cut Pro. And it's going to pop up sometimes based on the previous settings and a warning about the external AV connection, especially people have been using this when connected to a DV camera like we'll be using. Always just click continue on this. We're going to create our own settings, and so this actually doesn't matter. So I'm just going to click continue. Now, sometimes it'll launch cleanly like this, and sometimes it will ask you about setting up your scratch disks. If you got the warning about setting up the scratch disk, then you're actually already a step ahead, because it's always the first thing we want to set up. So if it's warning you about scratch disks, then you're good. If you don't get the scratch disk warning, then we're going to have to get there manually, because the scratch disk is going to tell Final Cut Pro where to save our video files and associated temporary information about this project. So the very first thing we want to do is go to the Final Cut Pro menu and go to System Settings. This is all the computer related stuff. It's not the video formats and frame rates and all that good stuff. This is actually system settings. They're called system settings because it's what the computer needs to be set like. And it defaults to this first tab, which is scratch disks, which is the only thing we need to look at. And by default, this scratch disk is set to the hard drive of the desktop of the internal hard drive. So we're going to change that to be our hard drive that we just formatted. And to do that, we click Set on this first button, on this first row, rather. And then we will choose our hard drive, which will be easy to find because it's going to be an external, some sort of an orange colored disk there. Mine is called Maxwell 250. I'm going to select that. And remember, we set up our folder structure so that I've got my class folder, DFVP111, and under there I have a folder called Scratch. Now this makes it easy to remember. Where do I put my Scratch disk? I put it in the folder called Scratch. And then I'm going to click Choose. And when that happens, you'll notice here that it's going to say how much space you have on the drive. My drive is called Maxwell 250. It's in the folder DFVP111 and the subfolder under that called Scratch. And everything else should be left alone. Video capture, video render, audio render should all be checked. And excuse me, everything else can stay as it is. The waveform, thumbnail, and autosave vault can stay on the local machine. Those are all temporary files that you don't have to have in order to open your project and have it work. The files that are set up here, you do need to have those with you so that you can transport your project from computer to computer. So pay attention to this first line, and again, if you need to set this, you click the Set button and you can look in here. Now what's interesting is when we click the Set button, we're still looking in the Scratch. If you click on this pop-down window, you can see what the path is. We're looking on the Maxwell 250 drive under the folder DFVP111, under the subfolder Scratch, and you see that it's created these new folders that weren't there before: audio render, capture scratch, and render files. So when you go to set up your scratch disk, again, you don't want to go inside any of those folders. You want to make sure it's always just inside Scratch. And then you can click OK. And then we're just about ready to use Final Cut Pro. The next thing we need to do, however, is to set up the basic settings of the video portion of Final Cut, not the computer files and folders, but tell it what format of video we're going to be working with. And we do that with something called the Easy Setup. This is an alternative to the audio-video settings. If you look at audio-video settings, you'll notice that there are an awful lot of detailed settings that you can make in here, which means there's plenty of opportunities to get something wrong. So what they did is, instead of making everybody go through all of those settings, they created something called an Easy Setup, which is basically presets for different styles of working. And so under Easy Setup, we're going to use NTSC is the format that we're working with. It's kind of an outdated standard, but it's the American video format standard. And under that, we're going to use DV NTSC. And I like the Firewire basic format. It's the most simple, it has the fewest variables, it doesn't have a lot of complication to it. So for our first projects, we'll be working with the DV NTSC Firewire basic setting. And then we'll click Setup. It's going to tell us, part of this Easy Setup is that you're connected to a Firewire device. Remember, it's called Firewire Basic. This assumes that you're connected to a camera or a video deck that you'll be doing your capturing and playback to. Right now we don't have that connected because we're only working with photo files that we're going to be using to create our video, but in the future we will actually have the camera connected, and that's all this is telling us, is that it can't find an NTSC FireWire device, which would be our camera. It means it's not attached, and I'm going to tell it, you know what, that's okay, I know that the camera's not attached, that's totally fine for what I'm doing now. I'm going to click continue. And now we're almost done. What we need to do next is to create a new project, because the untitled project that Final Cut starts you out with uses the old settings before you do the easy setup. So after you've done the easy setup, in order to get those settings to apply to anything in particular, we have to create a new project. And simple as that, it just creates untitled project 2, and it creates a default sequence for us called sequence 1. So of course, we don't want to call it Untitled Project 2 because that's not going to be very good. So we're going to do File, to Save Project As, and here's where we're going to use our other folder. You can twirl down this file selector if you don't have much information. If you click this, it'll expand. And again, we go to our disk, the DFVP111, and go to the Projects folder this time. Now, we're going to be editing our still story, so let's make a new folder under Projects. That's going to be called Still Story. So now if you see, we have the DFVP under the Projects folder, and under that folder, a folder called Still Story, and then we're going to call this project Still Story. And then I recommend that you put your name on it. That way, if anything gets confused, you can always find yours and keep it separate from other people's. Sometimes when you're working on shared resources like laptops, things can occasionally go awry. So the more that you can make your names specific to yourself, the more likely you will be able to sidestep any of those little gotchas. So I'm going to call mine Still Story Maxwell, and I'm going to save it in the Still Story folder, and click Save. Now you'll see that this project tab up here says Still Story Maxwell, and I have my sequence 1. What I can do is, I've still got this Untitled Project 1, I can simply close that. I'm going to go to the Untitled Project 1, File, to Close Project, and it will just go away like magic. So now all I've got here is my Still Story Maxwell. I've got a blank sequence, and you can see just a little bit of my timeline here if I shore it up. And there's nothing in here. It's a completely blank slate. It's where we're going to start from to start importing our photos and building our first story. So this is everything you need to know to get started. Feel free to review this if you get lost, and I hope that you guys have fun editing.